The late great George Eastman, aka Luigi Montefiore, is a man who truly needs no introduction, especially if you've been inspired to click on the thumbnail. I'm quite sure you're familiar with the work of the man who was also known as One in The New Barbarians, also known as Big Ape in After the Fall of New York, also known as 32 in Rabid Dogs, and renowned for so many more roles than that, Anthropophagous, of course, aka the Grim Reaper, and not only an acting virtuoso, also a writing virtuoso. He was highly adept at screenwriting. He wrote several of Joe D'Amato's post-apocalyptic films like Endgame and 2020 Texas Gladiators. He also wrote Anthropophagous, I believe, and he wrote Stage Fright, which was a very cool little slasher movie directed by Michele Soave, I believe. So with all of this, I may be about to shatter a few illusions. It may come as somewhat of a surprise what Luigi Montefiore, aka George Eastman, the larger-than-life giant of Italian cinema, actually thought about his work, actually thought about acting, actually thought about writing, and screenwriting in particular. And the main quote to take away from George Eastman's thoughts on his career, the most memorable quote that is he did say, "I did all that crap just for the money." Or as George Eastman would say, "I did all that crap just for the money." So there is a certain charm in that quote, even though it's eyebrow-raising, surprising, perhaps disappointing to some of you, in that never meet your heroes fashion. But personally, I find it quite interesting, quite hilarious, quite eye-opening. George Eastman, known to his parents and family as Luigi Montefiore, passed away recently, and he was interviewed far too infrequently, in my opinion, on his thoughts and opinions on his own career, his own legacy, and he did take quite a humble approach to this, quite an air of humility, and quite a surprising attitude for someone in the entertainment industry, much less someone in the film industry, much less an auteur filmmaker, which he most definitely was, wearing many hats, and those hats including acting, writing, and I believe even directing. Bunch of memorable roles, bunch of memorable scripts over the years from George Eastman. But nevertheless, he did seem to take his career with a grain of salt. There is that quote there that he gave where he did say, "I did all that crap for the money," and that basically distills his attitude to, I guess, cinema and legacy right there. When he was asked about a vocation, that was quite interesting. You'd think that with the quote about doing all that crap just for the money, that he'd be fairly nihilistic or fairly pessimistic or fairly cynical about pretty much everything. But quite the opposite seems to be the case. He was asked about his vocation, and he did say that his vocation, surprisingly, was as a painter. So George Eastman, aka Luigi Montefiore, did a lot of painting in his time, mainly set design and things like that, but he did do some recreational painting, or I guess personally inspiring painting, I guess you'd say. It wasn't what paid the bills, and he did have a pragmatic view of that. But in terms of vocations, George Eastman did consider being a humble painter his vocation, rather than a very well known, at least in cult cinema, B-movie, exploitation movie circles, well-known persona as a leading man, as a screenwriter, and as a director, I believe, as well, with varying results over the years, but nevertheless, very memorable results in my opinion. Some of my fondest memories are George Eastman movies like 1990, The Bronx Warriors, Warriors of the Wasteland, aka The New Barbarians, and of course Rabid Dogs, directed by Mario Bava, and let's not forget the infamous Anthropophagous, aka The Grim Reaper, and its sequel Absurd. So George was definitely a larger-than-life character. Many of us were quite gutted, if you'll pardon the pun, at the news of his recent passing. Apparently surrounded by friends and family, going out peacefully, which is all that any of us can ever hope for, and probably an ironic way to go out given his many violent deaths throughout Italian exploitation, cult, and horror cinema. So, quite an interesting attitude towards, I guess you'd say, towards his art form. And I don't think any of us would dispute that it was an art form. I know that a lot of people are dismissive of these B movies of the 70s and 80s, especially these Italian exploitation and horror movies. But let's be honest, they do have more artistic integrity than anything that you're likely to see on Netflix or Hulu or any of the vast disposable variety of streaming services that ruin cinema. And soon to be accompanied by YouTube, which seems to be pivoting away from content creators and trying to angle itself towards being a similarly soulless, heartless, and forgettable streaming service, and trying to basically phase out all of the things that make YouTube quite special, all of your favourite creators, and really just seems to be a dying platform in terms of what it was touted to be in general, but that's another video. So I guess what I'm saying with this is legacies are quite an interesting concept. The rest of us saw George Eastman, aka Luigi Montefiore's legacy, as something remarkably different to what he saw it as. Apparently the movies themselves, which should probably be quite a proud legacy for a lot of people, were seen as basically, as George would probably say, goat shit by the man himself. And it does seem that he was probably prouder of the painting that he did on sets of movies than he was of his acting or of his screenwriting or of any of the celluloid legacies that he's left for us to remember him by. So how do we honour this man? I guess maybe the best way to honour this man is next time you're watching an Italian movie, an Italian exploitation movie, or an Italian spaghetti western from the 70s, 80s and 90s, or the early 90s before the industry sadly declined. Maybe George might appreciate you looking at the very, I guess you'd say, diligent and quality and meticulously accomplished paint job in the background behind Franco Nero or Thomas Millian or even George Eastman himself. It does seem that with that these various quotes, like George Eastman saying, I did all that crap just for the money, and also with him saying that his real vocation was painting, it does seem that on the sets of these movies, George was probably more distracted by the figuring out what the shade of duck egg blue was painted on the wall or the table of the set than preparing for the scene that he was about to shoot. And even though he sounds a bit dismissive about his career, personally I feel that it does convey a certain sort of charm from George Eastman, and really it does paint a picture, if you'll pardon the pun, of a man that was proud of his craft, just not necessarily the craft that many of us were familiar with of his. And that was all of these wonderful Italian exploitation movies. So that's about all I've got on Luigi Montefiore, aka George Eastman, and his thoughts on the craft of filmmaking, his thoughts on acting and screenwriting, and basically thinking that, or regarding himself as having, quote, and I quote, done all that crap just for the money. So somehow it does seem befitting of such a larger-than-life character to have that kind of a an attitude, similar to Jesse Ventura in Predator when he says that he doesn't have time to bleed. So George is probably similar in that regard. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Trying to change the channel up a bit and try a few different things. Feels like I'm burnt out on stock standard reviews, so I'd rather talk about other aspects of strange and unusual cinema, and I thought that some of you might find this interesting, and infinitely more interesting than another review of Backrooms or Obsession. I think we're all a bit burnt out on the cavalcade of content. A lot of us are tuning out. A lot of us are embracing analog again. Part of me won't be surprised if video stores make a comeback soon. And we certainly live in strange times. And as I said, a lot of us are basically burnt out, tuning out, turning on and dropping out without the use of hallucinogens. Ironically, the hallucinogens in this day and age are things like streaming services and social media and the constant onslaught of information and misinformation. But in the midst of all that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you'll join me next time. If you did enjoy this, you'd like to see where it all goes from here, you're always welcome to like, share, or subscribe, or not. Either way, hope you have a good rest of the day. Take it easy.